Right. So I can see it sort of unspooling here. And I think we're good. All right. Well, hey, folks, Jeff Salzman here. Welcome to the Daily Evolver. And I am here with Ankur, the Light of 10,000 Heroes podcast at our great ongoing conversations about all things integral. And this morning, I'm extra excited because there's a lot going on with Ankur.
There is.
And he said, let's just get going and we can talk about it live. So here we are. Yeah, man.
There is. And there's two major topics that I want to bring today. Maybe we'll get to both of them, maybe not. But before that, I just want to warn you, just a few minutes ago, in preparing for this call, I started to feel like a little tickle in my throat and kind of some pressure in my head. I might be getting a little sick. Do you still feel comfortable doing this over Zoom?
Yeah, of course. I can't catch anything from you. As long as you're coherent and upright.
Because I'm going to be talking right into this microphone and it's going to be going right into your ears.
Well, maybe there's some subtle energy transmission. I don't know. I'm all good.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So there's an article that someone told me about yesterday that I brought up and I want to read. But before that is something a little personal I want to talk about. And it's somewhere between an apology and an exploration. So last week I asked you, I was like, hey, Jeff, I'm doing this event in December. I'm really excited about, would you mind promoting it to our Daily Evolver community here? And you were like, super, super gracious. You're like, sure, of course. And then I forgot to send you the description and you were sending out the email list and you're like, hey, send me that description, dude. And I did. And then I read it afterwards and I was like, that was a terrible description of the event.
Oh,
so I feel like I really, I kind of blew it for our community here. Oh, and I was thinking about that from a personal responsibility mindset. And I was like, all right. And this is part of what we do in the Night Vision Summit is like try to understand how our actions reflect our priorities. But it's like, why did I do that? Yeah. Not like, why did you do that? Be guilty and shame, but like, what were the good reasons? Yeah. That I did that? Because of all the people that I want to come to this event, the integral community is really at the top. Because this is about understanding how to actually create what we want to create in the world. Yeah. And the people in the integral world are like, those are the people that I trust to create something that's really going to push us forward. Right. So I just wanted to share that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, fair enough. I might, I read it. I published, just as you wrote it, and I didn't notice it not making sense. I thought it made perfect sense. And when you linked through to the description, it's well fleshed out there on the website. So I think we did good. See how it goes.
Okay. Yeah. And then there's one little piece of that I was just thinking about as I was getting ready. I was like, okay, I made a mistake. And then I was thinking about that word mistake in the context of the Daily Evolver and evolution. And I'm just curious if you think, are there mistakes? Like I was like, okay. And then I was like, all right, was slavery a mistake? Is the Holocaust a mistake? Or are these all they're just manifestations of who we are as individuals and as culture? And they're just evidence of where people are at a certain time. And they're not mistakes. They're just like, this is just like, hey man, this is the naked truth of where we're at as humans at this point in time. Like, how do you think about mistakes?
Yeah, well, I think that, if we look at something that's analogous, but a lot more simple, and that is an individual human being. We see that individual human beings can grow from a magical consciousness to a mythical consciousness to a scientific consciousness and so forth. And that's the basic evolution of consciousness that is recapitulated in culture in the collective. Yeah. So is a kid going to move from magic to mythic? And are there bad sort of behaviors in each of those? Yes. Is there bad behaviors? But is there a relative health of this child? And that's what you want with a culture too. Yes, every culture goes through these stages that are marked by ignorance and avarice and slavery and all kinds of, violence and misogyny and all of it. And there's more or less healthy ways to go through that, and more or less healthy ways to go through. When you talk about the Holocaust, it would be hard to have any kind of a moral universe that wouldn't say that shouldn't have happened. That ought not have happened. Yet, as you point out in a way, genocide of your enemy was standard procedure in all of human history. It just was. I mean, Plato talked about how we should take kids out to the battlefield so they can see what's going on here and so they could become good soldiers. This is Plato, the father of philosophy. But that would be such trauma now. You take a kid to a battlefield, that kid would be traumatized, and we'd have therapy for the rest of their lives. That's, the sort of moral progress that we've made. So is there a particular sour spot in history where we have still that genocidal impulse? It's plain vanilla, nothing new. And then we have modern means to carry it out. So then we have logistics, and we have, industrial. We have guys sitting around a boardroom table saying, what size should the crematoria be? Shit like that. So we have this modern execution of this genocidal, modern exterior, pre-modern interior. That's a sour spot in history. We're seeing it still. But so, yeah, that's a place now we know about that. And of course, the Holocaust and World War II and the first half of the 20th century in general is one of the reasons that humanity moved into a modern and postmodern space afterwards, the leading edge for sure, because we learned so much from that. And we learn from looking back and say, that shouldn't have happened. Or at least never again. That's the thing that we come out of it, and never let that happen again. So, mistake, maybe. At some point it's sort of semantic, but health, we want health. We're not going to not make mistakes. We're going to fail forward. We're going to do awful things. That's still more to come. But we want the forward movement, and we want to be as aware as possible. Yeah. Something like that.
Okay. All right. And that's a good lead into my second topic, which is the actual in the news today, this week in the news. I was talking to a mentor of mine yesterday, and this is this guy, John Giuliano. I don't know if you've heard, I did a few interviews with him on the 10,000 Heroes podcast.
Not sure. Remind me.
Yeah, he's just, goddamn, he's just amazing. So I met him. He gave a talk at Stanford when I was a sophomore there. And he had been living in El Salvador. He grew up in the Bronx. He's got this total New York potty mouth, and just, grew up in the Bronx, was really involved with the Jesuits and Dorothy Day and the Catholic Worker. He's friends with Dan Berrigan and Phil Berrigan, and ended up getting involved with the Salvadoran Civil War. Was a combatant for a time, was also like a kind of a priest character for a time there. This is a really high level overview of his long involvement. And then after helping negotiate the peace accords in 92, he stayed and helped rebuild this village. And so he's been in El Salvador since the mid 80s, and occasionally coming and giving speaking tours and raising money for this village. And that's how I met. And just an incredible human being. I went and lived with him for a while in El Salvador after college. And so John, I'm talking to John yesterday, and he's like, hey, you know who Aaron Rodgers is? And I was like, no, I mean, I know who Mr. Rogers is, but this is a different Rogers. and so he told me the story, and I'm going to read you, maybe you know it, but I'm going to read you the headline.
Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read you a little bit of this article and just get your reflection on kind of this. To me, this is like worlds colliding that I never would have imagined. Aaron Rodgers says consecutive MVP seasons gave him confidence.
Hey, Ankur, can I stop for a second? Is this lawnmower, are you hearing it?
No, I'm not.
Oh, good.
Yeah, thank you to the noise canceling engineers at Zoom. I'm not hearing that at all.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So back to reading. This is John's writing on Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, well, sorry. This is John told me the story, and then I looked it up, and this is USA Today.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Aaron Rodgers says consecutive MVP seasons gave him confidence to discuss ayahuasca use. Aaron Rodgers is trying to combat the stigma surrounding athletes' use of psychedelics. The quarterback was the keynote speaker with his friend and podcast host, Audrey Marcus. The former Green Bay Packers star rattled the sports world in August when he spoke about his ayahuasca use on Marcus's show, saying finding self-love through the psychedelic guided him to consecutive MVP seasons in 2020 and 2021. When I first did ayahuasca in 2020, this is a quote from the gentleman, I remember thinking afterwards, like, I'm going to have to talk about this at some point. Are people ready? How will it be received? And then I won the MVP, and then I did it again. And then I said, okay, I could probably talk about it now. If you do anything outside of the dinosaur norm in the NFL, you're an outlier. You don't care about football. You don't love football the right way. But it's going to be hard to cancel me because the previous year, 26 touchdowns, four interceptions. We had a good season. Ayahuasca, 48 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, MVP. What are you going to say?
Isn't that something? My goodness gracious. That's amazing to me. And it's so funny that you should say that, because I just this morning sat out in my garden with a friend, an old integral friend who stopped by for coffee and told me his ayahuasca experiences and how it made him a better and different person also, and in all kinds of good ways. And yeah, so this is happening. Wow, this is happening at warp speed, with Aaron Rodgers being, the tip of the spear here. And not only that, but the opening of these clinics and different kind of therapeutics now that are using ketamine, and in Colorado, the legalization of psychedelic mushrooms. There's a mainstreaming of psychedelics that is happening. And from an integral perspective, we would say that this is the going back and mining the gold from the earlier stages of development, because in tribal cultures, human beings have always been using psychedelics. And there's some theories that, at least I believe them when I read them, that it was human beings or humanoids eating mushrooms that brought on consciousness in the first place.
Yeah.
And then it sort of sticks, And then there's bigger theories that say that the microns of mushroom seeds, or however the hell they reproduce, are one of the few things can actually move through space. And so these spores, that's it, have been seeded through the universe so that, whatever. So I don't know, but I do know that was all repressed. When you get into the mythic religions, there's a monopoly on spiritual power. It comes from the priests and so forth. Hang on here. You got to hear that, right? Yeah. Hang on. It's just the blower. So, at that point, they don't want people freelancing their own spiritual communication with the divine. They want that mediated. And there's some evolution, there's big evolutionary value to that, actually. So it allows us to become, civilized in that way that we did. But so that becomes all repressed, stays repressed through modernity. And beginning with the hippies and with my generation, thank you very much, in the 60s, we brought it back. I was on the tail end of that. But I did my stint with mushrooms completely naively, it was all completely recreational. We would take them and go to the mall or to a concert or, whatever.
Yeah.
Not that I did it a whole lot, honestly. And I haven't done it in decades because I sort of subscribe to the great line from, I think, Alan Watts, who said, once you get the message, hang up the phone. And I love that because I got what mushrooms have to give you, which is, just the sense of oneness, the beyond the multiplicity. And that's happening. That's true. My friend this morning maintains that ayahuasca is a whole other ballgame and a whole other level of actually, and I understand from the cosmonauts I know that each of these drugs has a different kind of texture and a different kind of portal to the divine, if you will. And that ayahuasca has one that is spiritual and, it's more personal, if you will. Fair enough, fine. He tempted me, I might try it, but what the observation I would make is that as we move into integral, we're bringing back these wisdom traditions and medicine traditions that are powerful. And we know by their effects that it's like Aaron Rodgers. They actually they're not debilitating. They bring on a new next evolution of who you are. And that's something. What's your experience with them, Ankur?
I mean, to me, it just seems perfectly. I remember reading a poem. I don't know who it was. It was a book of poems where they said that LSD was the only beautiful invention of the 20th century. And to me, there's just a real perfection in terms of this evolution, that in the 20th century, we invented the most destructive tools could possibly imagine, the atomic weapons, and this, the synthetic version of all of these like ancestral medicinal plants, LSD, to kind of like help us balance it out. And given all of the alienation, the lack of meaning, the confusion, the greed, the breakdown of the family system, just all of it, to go to a medicine that is really made for this deeper work and this connection.
Yeah,
it just seems like,
yeah,
it's exactly what our culture as a whole is begging for.
Yeah, no, it's true. That's well said. The thing that modernity does, it does many wonderful things, but the bad thing it does is it really does disenchant the world completely. And so we are left with nothing. We explain away everything that isn't able to be sensed. And that's radical. I mean, we don't realize how that leaves us bereft of meaning, And then there's this other dimension of reality that is the oneness, that is the some whatever dimension it is, that time and space is arising within. And time and space is interpenetrated by this other thing, this eternal, infinite present, that is wise and intelligent and sees us and loves us, that anything that helps us break into seeing that and feeling that. It's like, I remember when I did mushrooms, it was like, oh my God, I'm seeing the light behind the light. Yeah. And I hadn't read it. I wasn't particularly spiritual at that point. I hadn't read, I guess I sort of was, but I hadn't read anything, Then you read all through history and the mystics, and that this is reality, only capital R reality. And then that, helps you put it in place and perspective. And hallelujah, I'm so happy that happened to me, and that it happened to me in my early 20s, because wow, what a relief in a way. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I had a similar experience, in my early 20s, of just having that breakthrough that, I grew up really atheist, really materialist, really into math, and which is great. I love math. Mm-hmm. But had a sense that like math was like the bedrock, and had this one experience with LSD where it just shattered that whole illusion. Mm-hmm. And I still have this really negative reaction to some spiritual language when you were talking about this divine presence out there that loves us. My mind has a really negative reaction to that.
Really?
Yeah. But I've experienced it.
Yeah.
So my mind doesn't, it's like, sorry.
Yeah.
But I have experienced it. And it's given me so much strength in a life where I had decades without structure.
Yeah.
Without externally imposed order. I was just traveling around the world, learning things, voluntary poverty, the whole thing. Without that, it would have been really hard.
Yeah, totally. No, totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I experienced it that way for decades, where I had an instant revulsion to any kind of language that was particularly personal language. Them seeing him, her seeing me, loving me, all of that. Yeah. I had a lot of antibodies to that. And they finally just went away because, again, I just had experience after experience where that felt more true. I felt like a better person for having it. That's always a sign, isn't it? Feel like a bigger, better person for having seen it. And then also integral, because integral, gives us this map and lens, thank you, Ken Wilber, and this whole lineage, that shows us that the divine, one of the ways we can sort it out is that the divine is available to us in first, second, and third person. That's helpful. So I think, okay, great, I'll buy that. So what are those three? So first person is my own expanded conscious awareness, and I become everything, and I am everything, and I know it. And that's, great. And that's a lot of meditation, Eastern, those kinds of traditions, also the mystic traditions. And then the second person is, I give it all to you.
Bhakti.
Yes. Take my burden, carry it for me. I am here, So then I have this communication, and Christianity, all the religions do it. The Buddhists do it too. It's not necessarily doctrine, but they do it in practice. Relate to saints and Jesus and God and all that as a second person. And then third person is just manifest reality all around us. And that would be the nature religions. They started there. It's like the forces of nature. You're just trying to make sense and seeing something. It's interesting. I saw something of that the other day when I went with an old friend to a casino here, which I hadn't done in a decade. So we're in this casino, and we're playing these new modern slot machines. There are these big curved screens that go up 3 feet above your head. There's all these lines and things going on. And he knows what's going on because he does this where he lives. And everybody around me knows what's going on. I am completely, I feel like the stupid kid. I just don't get anything. I can't even begin to understand what's going on the screen with all these lines and everything moving. And out of that, as I watch him and I'm learning and I'm really trying to see through his eyes, I'm seeing that there's a spiritual something that wants to come through, that if I play this way, if I think this way, if I touch it this way, if I relate, there's something that I can affect here. And yet, you can't really, but can you? But you can just see how this human desire to make connections and relate and, experience the cause and effect of this, of our experience of life, would cause us to make all kinds of friends, if you will, with natural forces that, lead us into the religions that we have today. And it's just something human beings are very good at. And in some ways, it calls into question, does any of it exist outside of our own minds and intention? I'll tell you my answer to that. And my answer to that is yes, it does it exists, whether or not I believe it. And the reason I go that way is because that makes me a better person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't really argue it, the jury of my peers, or mathematically, I couldn't prove it for sure. Or maybe you can. I don't know.
Well,
Math
I mean, I feel like
eludes me.
that's where studying Kant in college, and this is, I'm going to tell you all I remember about Kant. I'm going to give you the entirety of my understanding of Kant, which is that like, my conclusion was that you can't prove it and you can't disprove it.
Yeah.
And at that point, you can, for me, it freed me, liberated me to be pragmatic.
Yeah.
And be like, all right, is believing this going to make me an asshole, or is it going to make me awesome?
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy when you do it that way. So then how does that then manifest for you? And, when I talk about it, you have a little bit of a contraction, and, do you work with it in your life and practice?
Yeah, no, that's an old school reaction I have, because I talk about it all the time. And, but somehow I still react to it.
Yeah.
And I love the reminder of those three personhoods of the divine.
Yeah.
And all three are really alive in me,
Good.
And what I crave is I always crave the first one. I just love that experience of just like the dissolution and the oneness.
Yeah.
Don't have it every day.
No.
Wish I did.
Me too.
But I regularly have practices to create the third person one.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I go on these amazing hikes, usually once a week or more. Yeah. And, I live by this river and this ocean. And like yesterday, I conducted just a really small wedding ceremony for some friends.
Did you?
And to open it, I kind of honored the four elements, and just that Thich Nhat Hanh insight that in every cup of tea, the entire world is there and we're all interbeing. Yes. I brought that in and kind of threw sand from the beach on their feet and had them walk in the water and across the seaweed. And it was just all, and they were just, they were tripping out, they were in love, right? And they were just amazing. It's all, I can feel everything in me and in our marriage. And it was so beautiful. So there's that. But then this second person thing, which is the one that was hard for me, because I grew up in this Christian fundamentalist town and was rejecting a lot of their language because it was used with violence. I think it was in India when I realized so many of the bhajans, like the devotional songs, you could not really, and especially because in India, many people in the Hindu world, many people or most people's names are also names of gods. And that's because many of the gods have 1,000 names. But also because there's a lot of gods.
There's still plenty of names.
Yeah, there's plenty of names. And anything, just, there's just lots of names that are the names of gods, especially in the name of Krishna or whatever. And so all of these songs that are about like being in love with God, these devotional songs, could really easily just be love songs. And I came back here after years there and started listening to like 80s pop music. And I was like, oh, all of these could be like divine bhajans. And there's like really very little difference between like, I can't be the same without you, I need you, or whatever the pop song is saying, and like what these divine hymns are saying. Absolutely. And it really helped crystallize it for me that they're just different ways that we can even talk about the self. And so many of us are lost when we just don't feel that sense of love and connection and authenticity with the self. That same love song that could be for Krishna or Jesus or whatever could easily just be a song looking for the self. Yeah. And it really helped heal that for me. And so now anytime I see like a hymn from any religious tradition or an 80s love song, I have that same like divine relationship.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, I got the second person, but the first person I have some resistance to, actually, I notice. Is that egotistical? Is that selfing? Is that going to reify myself if I love myself? And I sort of always have a little bit of resistance to that. But you helped me through that here, because just to table that for a second, the second person, I get that there is, and I love that, you talk about essentially a romantic love to the divine. And the mystics talked a lot about that. They talked about being the brides of Christ and, that sort of thing. They weren't being so totally poetic, that's how they saw themselves. And so that's wonderful. And that's a wonderful way of dealing with God and with, and there's, with the chanting and there's endless practices of opening the heart in that loving way to God. But to oneself, man, that's good. I love that too. Because why not? Because this Jeff thing is a manifestation of this universe the way that apparently it wanted to manifest. And it's no better or worse than anything else that I'm worshiping, and that I'm practicing to worship at least. So why not? And I love that because that's one of the major categories. And I think I do it. But knowing it as a spiritual practice would help me do it less, in a less contracted way, actually, probably. Because, I certainly take good care of myself. I do what I want to do, and I
think that's obvious to everybody watching.
But to actually, honor / see the divine spark that's in me specifically, that's pretty good. And I could literally feel a contraction of resistance to it. So that's an interesting practice. Yeah. So thank you, man.
Thank you, Jeff. I love being here.
Yes,
I love it.
Yes, I love it too, man. I do have to go because I have to get on up at 11:45. Hard stop. So, all right, man. Well, we'll take this to the bank. Yeah, cash it in, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Take care, Ankur.